Roman Reigns may seem like an undrafted NFL lineman with a chronic illness, a hated babyface experiment, and a fan base that once booed him out of buildings. In reality, he's the final boss of modern wrestling, a man who turned every single setback into fuel for one of the wildest runs the company has ever seen. Leukemia, wellness drama, walkout crowds, none of it stopped him. Tonight, we are not just repeating the usual head-of-the-table story. We are digging into the bizarre details, the streaks, the family secrets, and the real-life twists that made Roman Reigns feel less like a top guy and more like a glitch in the system. But before we dive into the content, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but to us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, without much ado, let's begin. Beating leukemia. While headlining WWE, there are tough champions, and then there is Roman Reigns. This is a man whose entire adult life has been shaped by a chronic disease that blows up a lot of athletic careers before they really start. He was first told he had leukemia while chasing an NFL dream with the Minnesota Vikings, was released after that diagnosis, tried brief stints with Jacksonville and the Canadian League, and then eventually decided to go learn how to bump instead. Years later, when he finally reached the absolute top of WWE, the cancer came back. He opened Raw, handed back the Universal title, and told the world he was stepping away. Not because he was hurt, but because his own blood was turning against him. Then he came back in remission, hit another gear, and ran through the roster while staying on an oral chemotherapy medication he has said he'll most likely be on for the rest of his life. You watch him swagger down the ramp now as tribal chief, and it is easy to forget he is literally wrestling on borrowed time and a pharmacy schedule. Most people would have just retired. Roman built a dynasty on top of it. WWE turned Roman into the default WrestleMania closer. Every generation has one person the company simply refuses to take out of the spotlight. For this era, that person is Roman Reigns. Starting at WrestleMania 31, he began a run of closing the show against monsters like Brock Lesnar, Triple H, and even The Undertaker, stacking 4 straight Manias where he was trusted with the final frame. After a brief gap, the two-night era hit, and somehow, he was still the one they circled in red ink for the biggest match of the weekend. Stadium after stadium, night 2 after night 2, the main event graphic kept ending with his face, his belt, his story. Even when fans were not thrilled with the booking, the machine refused to move him out of that spot. You can argue about whether he deserved every single closing slot, but you cannot argue the pattern. In the modern era, when it is time to pick who walks last at WrestleMania, WWE keeps defaulting to Roman Reigns. Roman went over 3 years without taking a pinfall on TV or P. In a company where people constantly lose just to keep stories moving, Roman Reigns spent what felt like an entire presidential term without his shoulders staying down for 3. After being pinned by Baron Corbin at TLC in December 2019, the streak starts. He turns into the tribal chief, grabs the Universal title, and from that point on, pinning Roman becomes a myth. Challengers get counted out. Matches end in disqualifications. Tag partners eat the fall instead. The referee gets bumped, chaos breaks loose, and somehow, Roman is always the one still standing when the dust settles. By the time Jey Uso finally pins him in the Bloodline Civil War tag at Money in the Bank 2023, fans are reacting like they just saw a ghost. You forget how many big names came and went in that window. Edge could not do it. Bryan could not do it. Brock Lesnar could not do it. For over 3 years, Roman Reigns lived in that tiny class of wrestlers where a simple 3 count felt like an act of God. Not actually blood cousins with Rock. For years, WWE has sold you this fairy tale of the Samoan dynasty where The Rock and Roman Reigns are simply cousins, and that is that. It sounds simple, it sounds epic, and it sounds perfectly marketable on posters. The reality is stranger. On a literal genetic family tree, there is no direct bloodline connecting Joe Anoa'i and Dwayne Johnson. The link comes 1 generation up, when Roman's grandfather from the Anoa'i and family and Rock's grandfather from the Maivia side made a Samoan blood brother pact that essentially merged 2 wrestling dynasties into one giant clan. The kids and grandkids grew up treating each other as cousins, calling each other family, and sharing locker rooms long before WWE turned that into a storyline. So when Roman and Rock glare at each other and talk about the real head of the table, you are watching something that is not quite kayfabe and not quite biology. It is a worked-shoot family tree that got so powerful, the rest of the world just accepted it. Universal title reign lasted 1,316 days. Modern wrestling is built around short attention span. Titles change hands every few months just to spike social media and premium live event buys. Roman Reigns laughed at that playbook. When he captured the Universal Championship again in late 2020, it did not feel like the start of a historic reign. It felt like a course correction. Then, the days kept stacking. 100, 200, a full year. He steamrolled pay-per-views, absorbed challengers from both brands, unified another world title on top of it, and still never let go. By the time Cody Rhodes finally beat him at WrestleMania 40, that number had quietly crept up to 1,316 days as champion. That is not just a long run, that is a company handing one man the keys to almost an entire era and trusting him not to crash the car. In a product that moves at meme speed, Roman turned that belt into a multi-year final boss storyline, giving WWE its longest world title reign since Hulk Hogan in the 80s. More WrestleMania main events than Hogan. For a long time, the measuring stick for WrestleMania main events was simple. You asked how many times Hulk Hogan closed the show, and you compared everyone else to that. Roman Reigns looked at that record and turned it into a target. Between the single-night stadiums and the newer two-night format, he just kept landing in the last match slot over and over. Brock Lesnar is on the big stage again. Triple threat wars with other top stars. Bloodline drama that spills across an entire weekend and still ends with Roman in the spotlight. Now the stat line is out in the open. Roman has passed Hulk Hogan in total WrestleMania main events and sits alone at the top of that list. By the time WrestleMania 41 rolled around, he had headlined 10 WrestleManias, by WWE's own count, breaking Hulk Hogan's old mark of 8. That means this one guy from a family of wild Samoans has now owned the biggest stage in the business more times than the cartoon face of the entire 80s. That is not just a record, that is a generational takeover. Roman sold big as a hero, then went mega as a villain. Here is the part that casual fans miss. Even when crowds were booing Roman out of buildings during the early babyface years, his shirts were still flying off the racks. Families kept buying the gloves, the chest logo, the Superman punch gear. He was reported as one of WWE's top full-time merch sellers even while crowds were booing him. Then the heel turn happened. The music slowed down, the teeth got meaner, Paul Heyman appeared at his side, and suddenly the same people who once chanted that he sucked were lining up to throw money at Tribal Chief merch. New shirts, special edition titles, Bloodline graphics, Acknowledge Me branding everywhere. Some reports and interviews even compared that heel-era merch boom to John Cena's level numbers, which is almost unheard of for a long-term villain character. The insane twist is that the more arrogant, manipulative, and violent Roman became on screen, the more valuable his logo became at the merch stand. He did not just survive fan rejection, he turned their obsession into a business model. NFL career ended by leukemia diagnosis. In another universe, Roman Reigns is not wearing chest armor and holding a world title. He is eating double teams in the NFL. At Georgia Tech, he was a standout defensive tackle, a team captain who lined up on the same field as Calvin Johnson and looked like he was headed for real Sunday football. He went undrafted but still signed with the Minnesota Vikings and walked into camp with a legit shot at making the roster. Then the physical caught something that had nothing to do with his knees or shoulders: leukemia. Just like that, the Vikings let him go. A stint with Jacksonville and a run in the Canadian League could not save the dream. The disease did not just cost him a shot in Minnesota, it wrecked his chances of ever getting a real NFL run. And even though he bounced through Jacksonville and a season in the Canadian League, he never played a single NFL regular season snap. Wrestling fans talk about how Roman chose WWE. In reality, a medical chart shoved him out of the NFL and into the wildest second career imaginable. Tribal Chief used to install desks. Before the vests, before the pyro, before millions of people were forced to acknowledge him, Roman Reigns was building office furniture. Not as a gimmick, as an actual day job. After football fizzled out, he went home to Pensacola and took a 9-to-5 working for his older sister's installation business, hauling desks, chairs, and cubicle walls into bland corporate spaces. Some days, his cousins, the Usos, would be on the same crew. 3 future champions tightening bolts and dragging tables across carpet for people who had no idea what was standing in their conference room. Roman has talked about how wrong it felt, how he would look at the company shirt and know deep down this was not where his story was supposed to end. That frustration is what finally pushed him to call his father, get serious about training, and take a chance on developmental. The head of the table is literally a guy who used to install tables for a living. You cannot make that up. Roman's initial push was one of the most rejected in WWE history. If you jumped into wrestling during the Tribal Chief era, probably think Roman has always been this untouchable, cool villain. The truth is much ugly. When WWE first decided he was the chosen babyface, they poured everything into the project. Royal Rumble win in Philadelphia, massive singles push, WrestleMania main events against Brock Lesnar, Triple H, and even The Undertaker, and the crowd hated it. Boos were so loud that the company tried to mute them on television. Fans even walked out during the Backlash 2018 main event with Samoa Joe, chanting "Beat the Traffic" on the way out. Entire arenas are chanting for anyone else. Analysts compared it to a full-scale rebellion against the booking. where the audience was doing everything it could to reject the company's hand-picked hero. Other pushed guys have had backlash, but very few top stars have spent that many years getting that many opportunities while being that loudly rejected. The insane part is that WWE never really pulled the plug. They just kept pushing him through the hate until the creative finally caught up. Ring name borrowed from Fired Guy, Roman Reigns sounds like one of those perfect wrestling names that some marketing department cooked up on a whiteboard. In reality, it started as a half joke about a guy who was about to lose his job. Back in developmental, he wanted the name Roman. He just needed a last name that sounded big. On the roster at the time was another wrestler called Calvin Reigns. Roman liked the sound of it. When he heard Calvin Reigns was on his way out, he grabbed the last name, tweaked the spelling to Reigns with Corey Graves' help, and slapped it onto his own presentation. So, that last name you now associate with stadium main events and historic title runs originally belonged to someone who barely made it out of developmental. It is a little ruthless, a little opportunistic, and very on brand for the man who would later call himself head of the table. Even his ring name is built on taking something and making it bigger. Roman's heel turn saved his career from creative death. The craziest twist in Roman Reigns' story is that the version you see now almost never existed. He was a multi-time world champion with multiple WrestleMania main events and a fan base that still booed him out of buildings. His leukemia battle had earned him respect as a person, but the corporate superhero character was stalled out. Then, as the pandemic hit, he stepped away from WWE television for health reasons and came back months later with something completely different. No more smiling, no more pandering promos. He aligned with Paul Heyman, bullied his own cousins into line, and declared himself the tribal chief, the sun around which everyone else in WWE had to orbit. Suddenly, the same crowds that once rejected him could not get enough of the new monster boss, Roman. The stories got sharper. The matches felt bigger. WWE's business hit record level, and he was right in the middle of it. Without that heel turn, he is probably remembered as a failed corporate experiment who never quite clicked. With it, he looks like one of the greatest long-term characters the company has ever built. Marvelous verdict. At the end of all this, you realize Roman Reigns is not just the guy WWE picked. He's the guy who survived everything that should have broken him. The football dream died, the body betrayed him, the crowds rejected him, and somehow he came back colder, sharper, and more powerful every single time. You can argue about booking, about interference finishes, about how long that title run really should have lasted. What you cannot change is the record he left behind. The streaks, the numbers, the main events, the money. Whether you cheer him or boo him, one fact remains. You will remember the era of Roman Reigns long after the belt is gone, long after others replace him.